A year of COVID-19 has changed every facet of our lives: health, the economy, education, and even policing. Hello and welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Police are an integral part of our society and are a mainstay in the daily news cycle. Whether it's a major arrest, shooting, gruesome discovery, claims of excessive force, and nowadays, COVID infractions, police are front and center. There are always questions and their work is always under a microscope. Tonight, we talk to the man who is responsible for and answerable for police actions. The police commissioner joins us for a wide-ranging discussion. Stay tuned. That discussion begins on the other side of this break. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. On March 30th, just about a year ago, Paul Rolle became the 8th Commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police Force within an independent Bahamas. His swearing-in took place as the country entered the first lockdown due to coronavirus. At the time, he pledged to carry out his duties without fear, favor, pressure, or influence as he leads the organization through this period. And just recently, he's had to stand firm to that commitment in the face of rising criticism over police actions. Tonight, he's here to talk about policing in a pandemic as police celebrate their annual Police Month. Commissioner Paul Rolle, welcome to On the Record. Happy to have you with us tonight, sir.
Good evening, Jerome. It's good to be here. It's always a privilege to share.
So almost 1 year ago, March 30th, you were sworn in just really as the country was entering this first lockdown. Unprecedented. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We had no clue what the next year was going to be like. What was it like having to be sworn in the midst of a pandemic?
Jerome, it was shocking at first. It was a bit difficult because, when we came in, we've had all of this training, but I went to look for the manual on pandemic. There was none. I realized right off the break, but my training and my experience, my background is in science of crime, forensic. So I immediately drew up a 10-point plan, protocols for officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force to use. And that is what we was the foundation to try to protect the lives of our officers and members of the public alike.
What was it like, though, going into the unknown? I mean, you've been a police all these years, you've worked your way up to the top, but never before had you or anyone else had to deal with anything like this, and then so much had been put at the feet of the police. I mean, the emergency orders were put in place, you and your officers were responsible for enforcement. What was it like having to deal with so many unknowns?
It was a challenge. Honestly, I came in I had all of these plans as to, being commissioner once I knew what I was going to be and how we were going to do it. Off the bat, I realized that's not going to work. We moved straight into as you said, the unknown. We have these emergency orders, which we thought at the time, well, a month on, maybe 6 weeks, and this will be over. Immediately, I had to forget about what all of these great plans that I had for the police force and immediately take 1,200 officers and commit to policing the emergency powers here in New Providence. Plus, we had an additional 300 that we had to put in place in Grand Bahama. Once the lockdown took effect, we then had to put officers out in the streets. There was no restaurant open, so you got to understand, I had to then feed them. That for me was cooking roughly 1,000 meals and more per day. These were things unplanned for, but all of a sudden now I had to find a solution to it. And we teamed up with members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force who brought in there, so I had to feed them as well. And get the challenge then, we began right off the bat. There were a lot of criticisms from, some at first. Some criticism, they felt that, we should not be doing this. Persons didn't understand. I had to go and try and explain in the media what it was all about. I had to familiarize myself with the emergency power orders and had to interpret them and explain them to the officers because there was no interpretation for me. And so we were essentially, you're flying the plane as you learn to fly.
I like how you put that. Quite interesting. But in 2020 alone, there were about, or you estimated, some 4,275 infractions. These were based on breaches to the emergency powers. These numbers, when you look at them, could be interpreted as quite alarming. Do you believe that people took the emergency powers seriously? Do you think they took what was happening seriously and understood the seriousness of what we were in?
Yeah, I think persons took it seriously. In the first, as we began, a lot of persons were afraid. People were, by and large, there were one or two individuals who, even though they didn't get the message, one or two, persons who they really don't have anything to do, and they were the first ones that we had encountered, and then we started finding after the first couple of weeks, guys wanting to go and visit their significant others, vice versa. And that began to be the challenge. People were taking chances to sneak out and go and visit, and then they come home late, and then they were being stopped. They had no reason for being on the road, could not explain their reason for being out. But for the most part of the population, yes, persons were obeying. As time grew on now, I believe persons began to get a little wary. We started to open up, and as things began to open up, persons began taking chances and began to get annoyed and just wanted to move about. Persons didn't want to wear their masks, did not. So as far as the curfew, the curfew is one issue, but then the breaches now, in terms with social distancing, hosting of parties, and social gatherings, they were the ones that began to pose a threat as time grew on.
Back up a bit, in the beginning, there were people who were hauled before the courts. It was very public in many ways. And, in some instances, these were homeless people. And the police got a lot of criticism. Why would you arrest these individuals, or why would you bring these individuals before the court when, some discretion could have been had?
Yeah, I want to correct that, Jerome. There was no homeless person that was brought before the court. There were allegations of homeless person, I think, in Freeport. I made checks of that and confirmed that was not so.
Okay. But, you
But
know, further to that, you know, people thought, well, you know, these are tough times. Why haul these people before the courts? Why not just warn them and send them on their way?
because, you know, there's one thing, and when you have a curfew, which was the first thing, how do you warn somebody in a curfew and then do what? You leave them in breach? That was the difficulty. And you meet someone out at 2 a.m. in the morning, and then you might as well don't have the curfew. You say to them, well, go home. And then another officer is going to stop him because he's still on the road. So that would not solve that problem.
Now, do you believe, you mentioned, sir, the social gatherings and people not wearing masks. Do you think that the fines that were levied were deterrent, or do you think they should have been a little heavier?
Well, there are two parts to that. When they first started, the fines I thought were excessive because they were prison sentence. For instance, if you recall, I believe the incident in Grand Bahama, for example, the chap was sentenced to prison for a year. And well, I thought that, you know, for a breach, I thought that was a little excessive. And then it was also this situation that because they were being arrested, they were getting criminal records. And I approached the Prime Minister on it, and we had a discussion. I had suggested to him that perhaps we use a ticketing system which serves two purposes. It is a civil fine, one, and or criminal. If the person pays, there's no record. If they challenge it in court and they get convicted, then that's a criminal conviction. And the second aspect of it is that our officers, because we were arresting persons, many of the officers find themselves becoming infected. They were contracting the diseases because once you arrest those persons, you have to put them in the cell, you have to feed them, you have to take them out, you have to take them to the bathroom. There was too much interaction. And once we began the ticketing process, all of that fell away, no more infection. And since then, we've had probably no more than maybe 20, 30.
As we went along, sir, and we saw some of the easing of the restrictions, curfews went a little later, things seem to be, you know, we seem to be easing down a little bit. People started saying they didn't see the police. They weren't out at the start of the curfew. They didn't see them late at night, etc. Was there a lack of enforcement, and is that still happening? I mean, I don't see the police presence as I did in the very beginning, and even, you know, sometimes when you're on the way getting close to the curfew time, you don't see the officers in numbers that we would have seen a year ago, 9 months ago.
And that is because we changed the model. Curfew and lockdown is two different things. And I think you need to understand that when we say lockdown, that means no one should be moving. When we say curfew, it means that you should be home at a certain time. Once the country begins to open up, persons now allowed to attend various functions, go into the restaurants, go to the fish fry, for example, the complaints begin to pick up. It makes no sense to have officers out in the road when you're going to need officers to respond to these places, because wherever there are people, you're going to have differences, you're going to have arguments, you're going to have issues that you have to deal with. So I had to then change the model of policing in order to respond to those incidents. So what we did is we began paying more attention then to business places in the community. And then as places now were free to move, then, you know, obviously crime began to pick up. We have to be able to deter crime being into the community. So we reduced that aspect. We still have officers out on points during the night, but to a lesser extent, because we want to make sure now that persons close these establishments when they're supposed to and make their way home.
Do you all also look out when you're out there? I know that there's a COVID unit, but our officers are enforcing the social distancing and adhering to limits. Because sometimes, you ride around and you see crowds of people, and I wonder, well, who's checking to enforce capacity and things of that nature?
Again, the business folks have a duty to ensure the capacity. We have officers who are going around, and the COVID unit, they're doing checks on a regular basis. We also have the hotline for persons to call. People have been calling that. And so we say to persons, if you see a social gathering, you have to call us. Because although officers are out and about, they're not going to be going into people's homes, unless you get a call, and we'll go and check. And you get a call of a large gathering at a business establishment, we'll go and check. As they ride around, they suspect that something is amiss, they'll go in and check. But for the most part, if persons don't call, or they'll tell us after and say, they had this large gathering over there. Why don't y'all? You didn't do anything over there. Well, we didn't know.
One of the things I have to ask you, Commissioner, and we heard, during the lockdown periods, and even when curfews were being enforced a lot earlier, members of the public were complaining that they thought the police weren't adhering to the same rules, and police were gathering and doing other things. Of course, these are just allegations. I have no concrete evidence, but I'd heard it over and over that police were not abiding by the rules. Did you, sir, get any of these reports? And if so, how were they being handled? Who was policing the police?
We had one incident with an officer, I believe, that was in Grand Bahama. We'd gotten a call. I believe this officer had hosted a social gathering of some sort. It was brought to our attention, and the officer in charge took action against that officer. There was one other incident in New Providence, I believe, where an officer was actually hosting one of these parties. And I took disciplinary action against that officer, and he's no longer here in New Providence. They're the only two that I'm aware of. If there were more, I don't know anything about those, but, people talk, and if they don't bring it to our attention, I wouldn't know.
Well, that's a very good point. I think people talk and don't take action, and so I'm hoping if people know of these things in the future, they would let you know directly. The public also accused the police at times of undue abuse and excessive force sometimes in enforcing laws. I remember specifically a particular nightclub where the police went and shut down that was having a party, and there was a video of a confrontation. Did you, sir, have to deal with any instances where your officers were accused of undue or excessive force?
Yeah, that. And I believe this is the one in Angleston that you referred to.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I dealt with that. And again, I took action with those. Those officers appeared before the tribunal and were held to account for their actions.
What do you think, though, sir, was some of the greatest challenges that your officers are really facing during this period? This was a tremendous amount of stress for all of us. You admittedly, even at the top of this interview, talked about the fact that this was unknown territory for you in many ways. What would you say were some of the greatest challenges that you all that you faced? Sorry.
One of the most difficult challenges we faced were criticisms from persons within the community. Many of the criticisms that were levied against us were undue, and I think it was in an effort to discourage us from enforcing those orders, because it is difficult when you have to. You're actually almost like taking somebody's liberty and their rights and preventing them from doing the things that they ordinarily would do. And so we who are at the forefront, we took the brunt of that. And but despite that, I had to keep a lot of the officers focused. We've had officers who, they get tired too.
Was it demoralizing for them?
And I wouldn't say demoralizing. Because one of the things that I did is found creative ways to motivate and to keep them encouraged and to let them know that I had my message too, which did not go out in social media, but we dealt with it internally, did a whole lot, keep those officers, and then as time drew on, officers were getting tired because, this is about a year now, and, from I've been commissioner, I have not had no vacation, I've not had any time off, and same with officers. I began allowing officers to take a break, and I've been giving them time off so that they can go and get some rest. And I think now we're kind of regrouped and ready to rock and roll and to keep this country safe.
Well, sir, I know that you haven't taken time off, because anytime I message or call, you always answer, and sometimes that's even on a weekend. So I know it's been tough. We've got a lot more to talk about. You've had a busy week. This week we're going to talk about that and so much more. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. On the Record continues with the police commissioner right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. On Monday, leader of the Democratic National Alliance, Arinthia Kumalafe, along with the party chairman and several other members of the party, was summoned to the Central Police Station and held for 5 hours for questioning over a protest 3 weeks ago outside of Parliament. The DNA leader says she believes the order came from higher up, but Commissioner Paul Rolle, in a news conference that same day, took full responsibility for the police actions. The events unleashed a firestorm of criticism for politicians and police. Commissioner Rolle is my guest tonight here on the Record. Sir, the DNA leader was arrested along with 8 other individuals in connection with a demonstration on the 3rd of March. Why did it take so long for them to be brought in for questioning, as you said?
I don't think it took long, Jerome. I have a year in which to deal with matters. As I'd indicated during the press briefing, when the officers visited the site and spoke with the persons, they were warned of prosecution. So I made the decision at the time not to create a scene and arresting anyone once I learned that they were members of the DNA. The officers called back and said that they were DNA persons out there. I said not to arrest them. We will deal with it differently by way of summons later. And because Parliament was meeting, I did not want to interfere with it in that fashion. And so once Parliament break, the officers went ahead and invited them in. That was intended to be a quiet invitation, which is procedurally done, and do the interviews. The person when they were invited in, decided to bring in the media and began broadcasting live from social media, and that created the furor that we saw. It was never our intention, certainly, to create any public spectacle out of it. And as indicated, nobody from nowhere up give me any directions as to what to do. I'm the Commissioner of Police today, and I'm mindful of that. And I don't believe that I need anyone to tell me when, where, how, what, and why to do my job. I've heard some of which was being said in the public forum, and I stand on the record. I stand on the record that as the Commissioner of Police, I have the file here on my desk. I have it. As I said, and when the investigation is finished, the file will come to me. When I learned that the persons were in custody, I went down to the Central Police Station and I spoke to Ms. Kamalafi and her attorneys, and there were a number of persons there. I spoke to them and I explained to them at the time that this is procedural. The process is you'll be booked and interviewed. When they were invited in, they were told they were coming in to be interviewed, reference to these matters, and they brought their attorneys. So I would have thought that they understood fully well the process. They came in, they brought their attorneys. The attorneys understand that in order for the police to interview any suspected person, that in order you have to caution them, in which case they were booked, and the booking is only procedural. We don't search them. We don't put them in no cell. That is only that the officers will interview. And the lawyers were all present. I spoke with the lawyers, and as far as I was aware, there was no issue. And I spoke with all of the parties involved. And then I left and went on about my business and allowed the officers to complete what they were doing, complete the interviews, and get the file to me once it is finished. That's much as I know. When I start hearing the nonsense about politician, you saying someone directed me, then you should tell me who's the person that directed me, because I have said that no one directed the Commissioner of Police, and I'm waiting for that person someone to identify who that person is.
So you can unequivocally say no Prime Minister, no Attorney General, no Minister of National Security, all these people who were blamed, you're saying none of them would have given you any directions?
No Prime Minister, no Minister of National Security, no Attorney General give me any instructions. As a matter of fact, once the persons were in custody, I report to my upline as to what was going on.
So help us to understand then, you say you didn't want to interfere with what was happening in Parliament. None of these individuals are in Parliament. They don't sit in there. So if you could help us to understand, why the delay a little bit more. And then what were the concerns around this demonstration? It just seemed like they were demonstrating. So what were the concerns that led to you having to bring them in to question them and book them, as you said the procedure is?
Yeah, the two issues, Jerome, is, there's this thing about civil disobedience, which means that you understand the law. You decide that you're going to break the law. You understand that you're breaking the law, and you are prepared for the consequences.
So what was the law they were
law.
breaking? If you could help us, what law did they break?
The law of unlawful assembly. Because the issue was, and I don't want to get too much into the details of it because this matter is still active, and I want to resolve that amicably with the parties. The issue was that, and then, as I indicated, once it got into Parliament, there was no permit granted. You cannot just decide that you're going to assemble, block the streets, and go into Bay Street and march and attempt to get into Parliament, forced the way through the police protection that was set up. They were the issues, and the only issue, like I said, I made the determination. For some, you say 3 weeks. I said I have a year. And I don't see what is the rush. I'm saying I'm moving my time when I'm ready.
Were your officers at all under threat at any time, or did you feel that the Parliament was in danger of being breached?
Parliament, there was an attempt to breach. If you ask if I feel like it was in danger of being breached, that is why we put police officers at Parliament. My job is to protect the Parliament, and there was an attempt by a group of persons to enter into Parliament, and the police officers took action. The action was to prevent them from entering the Parliament. And based on the chants that were being said, and were being said, this is our Parliament, and we're going to take over our Parliament. And I said to them, under no circumstances we to allow anyone to enter into Parliament. The Parliament was in seven. That is they're the main issues, Jerome. And I determined that I also said to the officers not to arrest anyone at the Parliament, because I did not create a scene. I didn't want the officers to create a scene, because, people have a right to express themselves, okay? And they have a right to demonstrate. The law requires that if you want to do it, that you must get permission from the Commissioner of Police. I didn't make those rules. That is the law. If you don't like the law, Parliament is the place that can change it. And if Parliament wishes, Parliament can take that out, and then anyone can just log the street and go and do as they wish without any deference to the Commissioner of Police. But until then, I'm answerable to the law. I have to ensure that those laws are carried out.
So unequivocally, they did not apply for a permit. Had they applied for a permit, can you say in hindsight, would one have been given?
Yes. Well, first of all, they did not apply for a permit. If they had, yes, I would give permit. And I want you to, and I need the Bahamian people, Jerome, to understand when you apply for a permit, the police are not trying to prevent you from speaking and voicing your views. As a matter of fact, during the same time, taxi drivers were there. I gave them permit, and they also got a permit to be on Rawson Square, because the week prior they were out. They did not have a permit, and I told them they could not demonstrate, and they left. But persons have to understand, when I give you a permit, or when the commissioner issues the permit, officers are detailed to escort you and to be along with you to make sure that nobody bothers you. Because not everyone is going to agree with what you're doing, and not everybody agrees with what you're saying. And before someone comes and run them over in the middle of the road, I have to provide security for them. When we give you the issue the permit, we also detail officers to move along with you for your protection, to make sure that no one else interferes with you. That is the critical thing. But as far as what I'm hearing about trying to suppress persons from talking, that is the farthest from the truth. I have no interest. You have a right to do it. We simply say do it the right way.
One of the public criticisms out of all of this is the FNM and the PLP have both been out campaigning door to door in groups. We see the pictures on social media. They're in the news. They're circulated. We see groups of people not social distancing. Are you able to confirm whether these groups have permits to be out? If so, are they allowed to have these kinds of public gatherings?
I addressed that earlier, and I believe both of those political parties have spoken to it. Persons moving about and doing what they were doing is different from what we are dealing with here today. I don't want you to confuse those issues, because what we are dealing with is something strictly different from persons going door to door and talking to persons. There are two different issues, and one does not equivocate with the other.
Fair enough. Mrs. Kumalafe, in a media interview, also said that the DNA is intent on following the law. However, she made reference to a particular situation where they applied for a permit for a motorcade and they were denied. However, she claims the FNM was given approval. If so, how is that fair? Are all parties not, or should not all parties be operating on a level playing field?
I don't. The issue when they applied for a motorcade was during a lockdown, if my memory serves me correctly, and I don't really remember. You need to refresh my memory a little bit on that, because I recall the DNA applying for permit, and they were granted permits. We've been giving them permit all along. There was no issue, but it just happened that on this particular day they decided that they were not, didn't think that they needed a permit, and that was the issue. I kind of recall vaguely that there may have been a permit granted for a motorcade of 25 vehicles. Lockdown.
Sorry, you cut out
emergency orders.
Sorry, we lost you just for a minute. Take us back to, you said you do recall a permit being granted for, if you could take us just from that point.
Yeah, I kind of vaguely remember a permit being granted for a motorcade for 25 vehicles, or for 25 vehicles. During the emergency orders, remember, that takes away some of those powers that the commissioner ordinary and the prime minister, the competent authority, has to approve those, and not the commissioner. So although persons were sending them to me, I don't want to waste their time by sending them back. So what I've been doing for them is, on their behalf, sending them on and getting the approval for them, and then sending it back without saying to them, you have to go this way and go that way. I just send them on and let the competent authority approve it, send it back to me, and then I send it on to them. So that's as much as I can recall. Once they are, because the emergency orders take that powers away from me and granting those permits.
You would hear people say, do we truly have freedom of speech and the ability to voice our concerns if we have to ask, if we have to get permission to assemble, if we have to ask to be able to do these things? Do we really have freedom of speech and the ability to say what it is we need to say and get our message out if we have to always ask?
You have freedom of speech. The issue is not about speaking. The issue is about movement. And the emergency orders, as they remember, they are restricting our movement. That's all that they are doing. And they have nothing to do with speech, because persons are using whatever method. I don't recall anywhere in recent history where we've been trying to stop anybody from speaking. I mean, listen, Jerome, they've said all kinds of things about me. They've said all kinds of main things about the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And persons have said all manner of main things about some politicians. That's freedom of speech. No one is bordering that. Persons are allowed to express themselves. Political aspirants have a right to hold the government to account, same as the media. And I don't get into that aspect of it. And the government and the opposition, you look at Parliament, and they have the right to do. That has nothing to do with me. The only thing that my concern has been is when persons go and block the street and to enter forcefully into the Parliament building. They are the issues. It has nothing to do with persons expressing themselves. They've been doing it. No one stopped them from speaking.
All right, so thank you very much for clarifying a lot of those points. We're going to take our final break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about really some of the things that the police force has been facing within this pandemic, some crimes that we've noticed, particularly crimes against children and others. Stay with us. We are back with more with the police commissioner right after this. every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Last year, police had to postpone Police Month and the activities surrounding it due to the onset of the coronavirus. Every March, police observe a month of activities highlighting the work of the force and the officers who help to keep us safe day in and day out. But the work of a police officer isn't as easy by any stretch of the imagination. Here to give us more insight into the work of the police and their relationship with the public is the Police Commissioner Paul Rolle. Commissioner, what is the hardest part of a police officer's job? The part that we don't ever get to see or even understand?
I think the hardest part, and it goes at different levels, Tom, because where I sit at the top, I have I guess I'm at the bottom and the weight is on top of me. You have to invade the triangle. But across from every level, I don't think that policing is hard. That policing, you have to love it. You got this in your heart, policing in your soul, and policing your body, like Junkanoo. Officers get up every day, Jerome. They clean their shoes. They clean their uniform, their numerals. They get dressed and they come to work. They go on Bay Street. They stand in the hot sun. They go throughout. They ride in the patrol cars. We get the call and they confront the bad boys. This is what we do. And, one of the tenets of the police, when you sign up to become a police officer, you sign the attestation paper that I understand that belongs to the government of the Bahamas, to the people of the Bahamas. That gives me the ability to say to an officer, come to work 1 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning. They get dressed and they come to work. It gives me the ability to say, I need you to go to Eleuthera to work, Cat Island to work, Exuma to work. They pack their clothes, their belongings, and they go. And they do what they have to do in those islands. So rain, sunshine, officers get dressed, and they go and they do their work because that's what they love to do. You have to love it, and if you love it, it is not hard. So you find one or two officers who find that they don't like it, they don't want to do it, and they eventually leave and go and do something else. But for the most of us, we have high days, we have low days, but through it all, we press because we love what we do. We love to see the smiles on people's faces. And when you go door to door, and I go out myself, because I like to see the expression on the people's faces when they see their police. So people love the police.
That's the upside. You all have a lot of downsides as well I want to get into, particularly one of them. As of late, we've seen an increase in the violence against children. Last week, 10-year-old Ken Rondine, known as Guppy, was shot, as well as another 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. What kind of society, sir, have we become where children are being killed and injured by gunfire?
And I'm glad that you asked that question, Jerome, because the murder that happened a few weeks ago with Cameron is not the first. If you go back into last year, we've had similar instances where young children were being killed in crossfires. They were not the target. But persons, criminally minded persons now are demonstrating their blatant disregard for life and property. I understand recently that there was a murder and then there was a meeting of the minds, and the guys would go to their attorneys and say, listen, make up my will. I'm prepared to die, but I'm going to seek revenge at any cost. And they will go out, seek revenge with the understanding that if I die, I die. At all costs, I will avenge the death of my friend. And so when you find persons now going and shooting up a house, knowing full well that children are in that house, that is callous. That is despicable. You don't get no lower than that. Okay? We have to speak up about that. And all persons in the society, this is a good time now for upstanding people. You can't let that just go like that, because the family is hating. And when you ask, I mean, for me, I think that's one of the difficult part, I guess, I wasn't even focusing on that, of policing, to see a child on the ground being killed by a gunshot. And I've seen too many of those in my time, too many. I've investigated my time in CID. And I thought that, even coming out of CID, I don't go to the crime scenes as much, but I've seen it all. What we've seen in the last year, though, is a change, because even in the criminal world, criminals have the code that if you see the fellow who you want, and he's with his wife, and he's with his children, you don't shoot. You don't see that now. These guys, they don't care. They shoot the fellow who they are warring with. They shoot his girlfriend. They shoot his wife. They shoot the children. You saw in the Grove a couple of weeks ago, because guys were warring and shooting at. They wanted one fella. How the devil could you go and point a gun into a crowd and expect to miss everybody else and hit your target? That's the movies. In the real world, you just kill people. And I think we had 4 females shot. None of those were the target. And the target ran out through the back. So it is carelessness. And we get to the point now where places, the easy availability of guns, and when they then they run and hide. If you're that old and bad that you can do these things, then why don't you just surrender after you done do it? That's what I would like to see.
What, sir, this is almost a rhetorical question. What is the answer? I mean, how do we as citizens, one, protect ourselves? I mean, those of us who are among the innocent who just try to move around and live, this is our home, how do we protect ourselves? And, and what do you do? What are you and your officers doing to try and stop this, stem this violent tide that seems to be sweeping?
Yeah, and it's not as simple a police problem, Jerome. That is every year, like I said, about every person. I'll tell you this much. Everybody who got a gun in this country, someone who they live with knows that they have a gun. And I'm saying, if you're saying that your wife is an upstanding, decent person, she should say to you, go put that gun down. Your children see you with gun. Your brother sees you with gun. If you don't want to tell them, well, call the police and tell them, man, the boy got a gun. But until the law-abiding society speaks up, then we could expect the trend to continue. Persons have to cry out. They have to speak out. They have to support the police. They have to call wrong. Because as long as people are calling wrong right and right wrong, well, this is what you get. This doesn't just happen.
So go ahead, sir. I'll let you finish your sentence.
Yeah, we have been taking, so far for the year, the police have taken, I think, 80-odd guns. This is only March, man. This isn't even the April yet. We already recovered 80 guns and over 1,200 rounds of ammunition. Last year, we took 278. So if this trend continues, it simply means that we stand to get more with the easy availability of guns. There is an insatiable desire for a gun. And everyone seems to want a gun. I don't know that gun solves the problem. It does not in any sense it create more problem.
Well,
Use it
so I
in
want
the
to
event of
I want to move forward to this issue of wrong, and this next question has to do with the wrong that's on the side of the force. Police are often accused of brutality and excessive force. We touched a little bit on it in our first segment, but in March it was alleged that an assistant superintendent was heard on an audio recording slapping others. Slap, you know, remember after the slap, another voice said, "There you go, that's what he needs." Obviously, evidence of police brutality if you are slapping someone who's being held for questioning or whatever. This is not the first instance. There have been multiple accusations of police brutality, and fair enough, nothing that started under your watch. I've raised this question with many a police commissioner who came before you. What happens to officers who are accused of police brutality? What happens and what is being done to curb this? Because it doesn't seem as if it's going away. It seems as if it's getting worse in some instances.
I don't think it's getting worse, Jerome. But let's start with what we do. And I think since I've made it a point to improve our internal service. You would have recalled sometime in December early this year, I did a seminar on justifiable force and harm because I want to remind officers that they're not above the law. And officers have to understand that, you know, the law protects you when you're effecting an arrest and the suspect is resisting an arrest. The law, you have the authority, you can even kill the person if they are struggling and refusing to do. The law will protect you. Once that individual now is restrained, okay, he's now restrained, you have no reason to hit him, no reason to use force. Once he's in your custody, that man is your responsibility. You have to feed him, you have to, we don't clothe him, but you have to make sure his welfare. He tells you he's sick, you got to take him to the hospital, you have to notify his family. Officers have no rights to assault a prisoner in custody. And I believe my record on that, the officers know where I stand with it. I've made that clear. And where we have evidence of it, Jerome, I have been taking action. And at some point, I'm meeting with the police inspectorate. Some point either next week or thereabout, I want to speak with them first, and maybe they would, I don't know whether they would want to speak about it or me, but I'm seeking guidance on, because all of these, the tribunal and those we do, they are mainly internal. And I realize that persons making complaints, the results, we go before the tribunal, but our system of dealing with it is all internal. So the public does not really get that feedback from the police as to what we are doing.
That's a part of your problem. So the public does not see what happens to these officers. We do not know of the outcome unless it's a very high profile situation or unless that officer comes before the courts for some reason. But there's nothing that we see or hear or know to suggest that any kind of disciplinary action is taken.
And I'm agreeing with you with that. I'm agreeing with Jerome, and that's what I'm saying, that I realize that is the part of our problem. I have to now find a way to make that information available to the public. And I have before me right now listing with the complaints that were made. Normally, we just give you the numbers of complaints made and the outcome in terms of how many were resolved, how many went before the tribunal. But I'm going to take it further. And at some point, I want to speak with the media pointedly about the individual cases. And, you know, that because I believe persons need to know that I've been taking action against those officers.
I applaud you for that, sir. We look forward to it. I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for you for that. Final question, so we're running out of time. In August, police began using body cams as a way to aid in investigations and to keep police accountable. Have they been effective? Are these body cams going to be the answer to many of the issues and many of the questions and concerns that the public raises almost every time there is a police incident?
Yes. And the matter which you asked about with the club, body cameras helped me with that. And I've taken a certain course of action as a result after reviewing the body cam. And I realized there that, Jerome, we had taken some course of action with the officers. And after viewing the body camera, I took further action against them because I realized the officers were not being truthful.
And so thank you very much. We hope that, we didn't get time to touch on everything, but this certainly was a wide-ranging discussion. I wish you all the best. I know it's been just about a year. It's been a tough year, and you came in at probably one of the most difficult times in our period. So we understand the challenges, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. The Bahamas certainly needs you and the officers out there every day who help to keep us safe. And who help to uphold the law. So we thank you, sir, for your work and for your service.
Thank you, Jerome, and thank you, Muhammad.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of On the Record. Thank you to my guest, Commissioner Paul Rolle, on behalf of my technical and producing staff. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time, same place, right here on The Record.